The Maori Party is asking for an apology from former Prime Minister Helen Clark and made clear its opposition to her bid for the top job at the UN. The bad blood runs deep between the Maori Party and Helen Clark, rooted in historical grievances relating to foreshore and seabed, tuihoi and Indigenous rights. Party co-leader Marama Fox says while they do not support Miss Clark, an apology to Māori would prove she's learnt from her mistakes. The Labour Party leader Andrew Little disagrees with the Maori Party's stance.
Really disappointing. Helen Clark, is widely known internationally, representative of New Zealand. This is a great opportunity for a New Zealander to take one of the prime roles in international and diplomatic affairs, the Secretary Generalship of the UN. Every New Zealander should be behind that, and I think it, frankly stinks that the Māori Party say they're not going to support it. In terms of the foreshore and seabed, I know certainly when I was party president of the Labour Party, I expressed the party's regret that that situation had happened. We should never deny anybody the right to put their legal rights in court and have them tested. Likewise on the tuihoi raids, Annette King as Police Minister, she's apologised for that, and to the extent that the Minister is ever responsible for what uniformed police officers do. And I think we can look back on that and we are big enough to say, yep, those things were bad, they shouldn't have happened. This is an opportunity, however, when it comes to the UN and the Secretary Generalship, for New Zealand to have the leading role, the prestigious role. And Helen Clark, Prime Minister of New Zealand for 9 years, someone who's made a huge contribution to New Zealand, that ought to be recognised. And I would have thought the Māori Party was big enough to recognise that that's good for all New Zealand, including all Māori.
Maori Party co-leader Marama Fox joins us now live from our gallery office. Welcome to the program. Tēnā koe, Marama. Did you hear Andrew Little then? Could you hear him?
Yes, I could.
What do you say in response to him, particularly his final point about this being good for all New Zealanders?
Well, of course, as a Kiwi, we'd be very proud to have a Kiwi in the top role of the UN as the Secretary General. But you'd want to know that the person who holds that role is going to be a great global leader who's going to send people to some of the hotspots around the world where the most vulnerable people who will be impacted upon by the decisions made by the Secretary General will be Indigenous peoples around the world. And we only need to look at Helen Clark's legacy that she leaves behind her, in fact the legacy of the Labour Party, to know that there are some questions that should be raised. And
okay,
it's good.
This goes back to 2004, doesn't it? And the foreshore and seabed legislation, from which, of course, the Maori Party was born. In fact, I have here Helen Clark's statement announcing the departure of Tariana Turia from Cabinet and saying we will see Mrs Turia at the general election. So this is bad blood that goes back 12 years.
Well, I think it's not just the bad blood that goes back between the Māori Party and the Labour Party, or Helen Clark as the leader at that time, but here are some fundamental things. The Labour Party refused to sign the Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which is a part of the UN agenda. The Labour Party in its time saw the tuihoi raids, and of which, yes, Annette King has apologised, but we've never heard an admission of apology or mistake by the Labour leader of the time. And of course also there is the foreshore and seabed amendment, which took the rights of Māori away to go to court, to have their day in court and have that heard. Now Andrew Little has apologised. I would think in the very least somebody who is seeking the top role of the UN would also have the foresight and the ability to look back at those past mistakes, acknowledge them and move on. And I think until she does that, how can we be supportive of that role?
I'm looking at Tariana Turia speaking in the first reading of the Foreshore and Seabed Bill in May 2004, in the House of course, a foreshore and seabed package written in the interests of Middle New Zealand. We will not be relegated to second-class citizens in our own land. In other words, do you feel still betrayed by that? Of course you do. It's totally self-evident from what you're saying. But do you think that's emblematic of the kind of pragmatism that Helen Clark brings to politics?
Pragmatism in which vulnerable people, Indigenous people in the world will be sidelined for the popular vote. I mean, that's what we see across the world. We would hope that the person at the top job, the Secretary General of the United Nations, would have the most vulnerable peoples of the world at the foremost of her thoughts. Should Helen Clark take upon her the learnings from the mistakes that she's made in the past, then she should do well in that role. Should she be able to learn from the time that she's had in the UN, then she should do well in that role. But an indication that she has accepted that there were mistakes made during her time at the helm of the Labour Party would be an apology.
Can I come in there?
Least.
If you get that indication, if you get that apology, would the Maori Party come out and say, right, thank you, we back you?
I think it would go a long way to showing that Helen Clark has been able to understand just the injustice of those actions and her ability to move forward into the future and take all of the world's most vulnerable people to mind when she, as the top person at the helm, makes decisions that will impact upon them.
2 points, of course. One is that the people who are following this will almost certainly hear what you're saying one way or another. It's now beginning to be widely reported. Are you prepared to be blamed for the impact of this on Helen Clark's campaign? I mean, is that something you've discussed? Have you discussed it, for example, with the government who you are in a form of coalition with? John Key and the National Party are backing Helen Clark?
As is their right, but we also have the right to be the independent voice, and we strongly want to make sure that if Helen Clark takes up that role, she understands the rights of Indigenous peoples, of which she did not sign up to that declaration when she was in the position to do so. Let me just say, John. Well, let me just say that should Helen Clark learn from those things, we would see a change in her disposition. We would see the olive branch being held out toward Māori and Indigenous peoples in this country. We've not seen that in her entire time there, yet she uses Waiata Māori and Māori people to support her bid. Now, it's not me that brought this up. Tina Ngata, who we support, went to the United Nations and made a submission and brought this to the attention of the United Nations. We have merely supported her stance, but we are willing to stand on our integrity, and I think Helen Clark should be willing to stand on her legacy and her role or her ability as the Prime Minister of the time to lead this country and therefore lead the world. She should acknowledge those things as she moves forward.
Marama Fox, co-leader of the Maori Party, joining us live from our gallery office in Parliament. Thank you very much.